Hey, welcome back to the Think Like a Teacher podcast. This episode, we are hosting like one of a kind top voice in AI for education. This is Dan Fitzpatrick. Dan, would you mind just introducing yourself and kind of what it is you're up to these days?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Sam. I really appreciate you having me on and wanting to talk about this subject, which I think is really important. And yeah, I was a high school teacher, so as your listeners can probably tell from my accent, I'm from England, from the northeast of England, a city called Newcastle, and I trained to be a teacher, high school teacher, in Manchester, in England, and then moved back to Newcastle, where I moved on to the senior leadership team of a high school. I'd kind of always been really interested in educational technology. It always kind of made me think this is kind of a no-brainer, and it always used to baffle me why at least in the English education system, not many people were using the benefits of cloud technology and so on. So I kind of really saw it as my mission to kind of evangelize anybody who would listen in the ways of educational technology. Really, that really wanted to, because not just to help the teachers but to help the students. And I always thought, if I was a student, I'd love to have resources and activities for learning available wherever I am at any time I want to access them. And so it just made sense to try and push that agenda, really. And yeah, it's kind of what got me into leadership within schools. So I did it with a kind of speciality in educational technology, and careers as well. So which I saw as very linked. So I was excited to have both of those responsibilities. Kind of outside of my day job, I had a podcast. So I think for about 5 years, called Edufuturists, which I suppose anybody who really gets into educational technology, it doesn't take long till you start to look at kind of the future of education as well. It kind of pushes you naturally in that direction into what the future of education might look like, and that's what it did, really. And I got really excited on the podcast to talk to innovators around the world who were really kind of pushing the boundaries of what's possible. And the podcast is still going. I stepped back from it 2 years ago, but it's still going, called Edufuturists. And then I moved into higher education. So I as a director for digital strategy and innovation. And it was there that I really started to come across what was first introduced to me as a technology that was a bit like a calculator for words, and kind of,
I like that.
So like pre-ChatGPT large language models. And so we started to look and experiment with some of these to see if they could help our teachers with grading and giving feedback, and just very early experiments. And then end of November 2022, ChatGPT was released, and those early days, and I say early days, it was barely 2 years ago, but it's...
Yeah, I know. I think about that too. Time has flown with AI when I think like, oh yeah, back in the day, like back in the day was like yesterday.
Yeah, I think, that's what we're like as humans, aren't we? We're like an amazing earth-shattering technology is released, and 2 days later we're like, yeah, okay, we get it. What's next? We just kind of get used to it straight away. There wasn't many people. I suppose those early few days after its release, there wasn't many people talking about it from an educational point of view, and so I decided to start posting some kind of screenshots online, and I was on Twitter as it was then, and started just sharing things, and I suppose being probably really early and sharing how ChatGPT help educators, started to get a lot of interest, started to get tweets that would go viral, and then started to get interest for like webinars, things like that, and it really made me think, actually, I love doing this, and I love being with other teachers and helping them kind of improve their workflow in it. And so I kind of within a few months, we've been invited to give talks. I've been invited to write a book, which was the first book, The AI Classroom, and then I was able to kind of shift away from my day job and do this full time. And I'm really lucky, in a great position where I get to travel the world and work with schools, districts, businesses, and help them with strategy around preparing for the future of education and what that might look like in this new age.
Wow. So it sounds like this all kind of just happened pretty quickly. Just like
Yeah, in
one
a
day you're like,
sense.
hey, here's some cool ideas. And then all of a sudden, I mean, in the timeline of things, like 2 years is not that long.
Yeah.
So like makes me think of like, oh yeah, gee, what could happen in the next 2 years?
Yeah,
It's
and
gonna
I
be
think
totally different.
people sometimes say that it must have. It sounds like it just happened overnight, but I'd kind of been doing a lot of that already. So I'd
Right.
been doing a lot of events and talks around educational technology and future of education before then, and I had
Yeah.
done some stuff on AI, but it was just part of a repertoire of things I did around the future of education.
Right.
But then I suppose with the release of ChatGPT, it kind of shifted over to pretty much 100%
Yeah.
of what I was doing, because that's where the demand was. That's where a lot of people wanted to know about it more, and I think people started to recognize that this isn't just another tool. This is something that actually might make us rethink education if this technology is
Right.
going to progress and we're going to have a world of ubiquitous AI, which it looks like we probably are. Then actually that it raises some fundamental questions about how we do education as well.
Right. Right. And kind of just going back just a moment, like to how it has happened quickly for you. Something that I've been thinking a lot about is when people hear about an overnight success, like, oh yeah, you made it big. Really, like the key to being an overnight success is like 5+ years of hard work. And then
Yeah.
like to the rest of the world, you seem like, oh, this Dan guy just came out of nowhere. But really, you've been working hard on it for a long time, it
Yeah,
sounds
and
like.
I guess I'd been thinking for years as well that I want to write a book, and I think I must have probably planned about 10 different books in that time, and
Oh, wow.
then maybe got bored with the idea, never had the time, never had the motivation. So that it was always something I wanted to do, and then when a publisher asked me, it kind of gave me the incentive to really, I suppose, to be accountable and to get it done really. And there was a bit of pressure
Yeah.
because everyone wanted to know about AI, and so it
Yeah.
couldn't be the type of book where you sign a contract and then the book comes out 2 years later, or even a year later, or even 6 months later. It had to be a book that we really kind of stopped everything, and within a few months got it
Oh,
done
wow.
really. So it was a fast process, and that's kind of, I suppose that's part of what allows me to do my work. And I quite regularly get asked if I'm giving a keynote somewhere, for example. I always get at least one person come up to me afterwards and kind of say, how can I do what you do? And my number one advice is always write a book. Like seriously, I think a
Yeah.
lot of people think about it a lot. A lot of people think, oh, that's something I want to do, like a bucket list thing. At some point, I want to have my name on a book. And rightfully so. I think a lot of people do have amazing advice and experience to share. But I'd really say just do it sooner than later, and get it done. It might be a bad book, like, but at least it's done. The first one's done, and
Yeah.
you can learn your lessons from that book and move on to the next one. And I think once you start to do that, it makes you think deeply about a topic and regularly. And I think once you're in a mindset where you're thinking deeply and regularly about a topic, and then also engaging with other people around that topic constantly, you're on a huge learning curve all of the time, and it really feeds kind of
Yeah.
when you're asked to give talks or webinars or interviews like this. It really feeds kind of the expertise around that, and so and also then other people see you as somebody who's actually
Yeah.
knows something about this, and then therefore might want you to come and speak or interview you. And it's kind of, yeah, it kind of all, I think definitely take that book seriously, because I think most people think about it, but I think get it done. I remember a
Yeah.
friend saying to me once, when I was really struggling with motivation, a friend of mine who'd actually written a book on stock market investing a few years ago. He said to me, he said, it's going to be a few months of pain for potentially a few years of reward. And that really kind of gave me the incentive to want to do it. And he's been completely right. He's been absolutely right in that, and and the reward in that is not necessarily I get to stand on a stage and speak to people,
Sure.
although it's a really cool job to have. It's getting to show, first of all, it's getting to show teachers tools that are going to help their life, and
Yeah.
that's a huge reward considering that was me not very long ago, and I struggled and I missed time with the family because I was working on a weekend, and so to try and help other teachers combat that is such a privilege, and also get to help schools start to think about the future of education, which has been a real passion of mine for a long time. But to get to share that is a real privilege as well. So, yeah, it's been quite a journey, but I wouldn't change it for the world.
That's fantastic. So you talk about, I mean, it wasn't that long ago you were in the classroom doing these things, struggling. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about a little bit is just, I work with a lot of new teachers. So as an instructional coach, our big push is onboarding these teachers within their first 3 years. Because as you probably know, like those first 3 years kind of make it or break it for a lot of teachers. And in today's world, I don't know how it is in the English education system, but at least in the United States, there's a huge amount of turnover for teachers for one reason or another. Compensation is a big thing, but I think workload and time and just really understanding how big of a deal education is hard for some. And so that's where we focus a lot. And one of the big mysteries of education is this idea of differentiating your instruction to meet so many different needs of very different students. For example, I teach in a school where we have a large population of students who speak English as a second language. So it's not their primary language, from not just one country either. Like there's many different countries represented, many cultures represented. And on top of that, there are students with other learning disabilities who have individualized education plans that need specific things. So, excuse me, I'm getting a phone call.
That's okay.
The job never stops. Hold on.
Okay.
And we're back. Little crisis. Somebody has a computer that they're unfamiliar with.
Oh yeah, of course you're still at work, aren't you?
Yeah. So for me, we're at 10:30 a.m.
Oh wow. It's 4:30. So yeah.
I feel very privileged in my job. We'll come back just a minute, kind of explaining what I'm doing. I teach part-time, so we have a block schedule of 8 periods. 4 of those periods I teach advanced bio, so Anat and Phys, AP and IB biology.
Oh wow.
And then the other half of the time I get to do this. I get to talk to other educators. I get to help coach teachers, and that was that call. Somebody's having a little struggle, but.
Yeah, no worries. No worries.
Yeah. So we're talking about this idea of differentiation and how for new teachers especially, it's a challenging concept to understand. And so with your experience both in the classroom and using technology tools, what's your first approach when considering an idea like how to differentiate your lesson plans?
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. And I think we get into teaching because we want to help students. I think that's the primary motivator for most teachers. I imagine it definitely was the motivator for me, and as part of that, we want to be able to spend time with our students and really help them. And like you say, and it's the same in the UK system as well, that we have a high churn rate within 3 years of teachers coming in. And I think a large part of it is because the pressure and the workload means that you can't really it forces the teacher away from the student slightly, and so that because there's not enough time, I suppose, to spend with the individuals in the classroom. And I know it's definitely within the English education system. I was part of a high school that did this, that kind of tried to take more of an approach of teaching to the top of the class, and kind of, personally, I think it's a flawed system. But it's become very popular in recent years because of certain publications that have come out around teaching practices to to really teach to the top, and then kind of somehow all the rest of the students will rise to the top. But it treats the class as kind of one body, and I think we need to go back to thinking about each of the students as individuals, and that they all need individual support and help. And a part of that is the differentiation, isn't it? And I remember when I was trained to be a teacher, I think we were told to kind of split the class into three. So kind of high performing,
Okay.
middle of the road, and then those who needed more support than the others. And I'm sure when I was assessed when I was trained to be a teacher on creating resources to three sets of resources for each lesson, and I suppose that in the English system anyway, you how it was when I trained was you trained for a year and then you're qualified, and it's the most intense, crazy year of your life that year.
Yeah.
Absolutely draining. And then suddenly, when you're qualified and you don't have someone watching you as much,
All
you
the scaffolding goes away.
yeah, and you learn to cut
Yeah.
corners. You learn to
Yeah.
kind of differentiate off the hoof rather than in preparation in some regard. And I suppose that some of that is honing the skill, but it is kind of like an unattainable dream. How do we differentiate for every single student in the class?
Yeah.
And especially as class sizes get bigger. Like, I know some friends who are teaching 60 students in a class,
Oh, wow.
which is, I mean, how do you take care of the individual student in that case? So I think AI can help here, and AI is not a magic arrow. It's not something that's gonna solve it, but used in collaboration, used as an assistant, it can help us to solve it. So I think the first step is always realizing, and in my first book, The AI Classroom, I wrote a chapter called this, which is outsource your doing, not your thinking. So I think always have in mind that you're the main agent within this. AI, especially like a tool like ChatGPT or Gemini or a similar tool, sounds very intelligent, but it's not a professional teacher. So you have to remain the main thinker whenever you're discussing whatever it is with one of these tools, or you're getting it to create a resource or a plan for a lesson, for example. Being in charge is your role. This is just to do some of the doing for you. So, and I think it's about having a conversation with it. I think this is the first time we've ever had a technology that speaks our language, and we don't have to speak its language. So we've all kind of over the last few decades and back beyond that have had to learn the computer's language in order to use it. So how do we type? What buttons do we press? How does the operating system work? How do we get out of it what we need? If it's a complex system, which we do use in various areas of education, we need specialized training on it. And I mean, even to the point where if people literally learn languages, coding languages to get what they need out of computers. And this is the first time ever we've got computers speak our language, and I often say to teachers, once you've got to a website like ChatGPT, for example, you don't need any technical skills from there on in. Like, your technical skills are not needed. So if a teacher is saying, "Oh, I don't understand AI, I'm not a technical person," this is the least. These types of new AI tools are the least technical tools ever to exist. Yeah. And in fact, the skills that we need to be able to use them is communication skills. It's being able to communicate, have good literacy skills. Those are the skills that are needed to get quality. And it's having skills to be able to, and I think teachers, educators, out of pretty much any profession in society, already have many of the skills needed to use this. And I'll give you an example. So when I was teaching, we used to do a lot of modeling. So we had a process called I do, we do, you do, where I model an answer, we do it together, then they do it. Actually using that type of language and using that type of methodology with an AI helps you to get really good results from an AI. So let's say you're getting an AI to create a resource for you for a lesson. I don't know, let's say photosynthesis, as you're a biology teacher. So so we need a good resource on photosynthesis. but it needs to be a certain way. It needs to kind of match how you work, has to have your voice in there. Then actually model into it, not just explaining, not just telling, actually showing in AI, just like you would with a human, is really powerful. And so taking a previous resource you've created, uploading it and saying, this is my standard, this is how I write, this is the kind of resource I create, now use this as a guide. So you're kind of using those same skills. And so when you're doing this and you're then creating a resource, or if you have a pre-existing resource, you can ask it to help you with that differentiation, and you can ask it to help you give multiple, like change the reading level of a piece of work, change the language of a piece of work very, very easily. And these AIs, especially when it comes to the English language, can do that very, very easily, and of really high quality. A lot of the time, there still can be little inaccuracies, so we want to look out for those and double check those. Also, what I find works is explaining types of students. Now, we don't want to put students' personal data into these technologies, but you could say something like, I don't know, 3 of the students in my class have ADHD. Could you adapt this task to keep them engaged and make it accessible to them, and see what comes up? You might even have, and I think the more information you give the AI, the better result you're going to get. So if you've already got some strategies, or if a child psychologist have come up with some strategies for you to follow to help engage some of those students in your class, then you might want to take them, give the task to the AI, the kind of the middle of the road task that you've created, give it the pointers from the child psychologist report, and then say, right, take this on board, and could you redesign this task to make this task engaging? Now, to do that manually yourself, you could be looking at half an hour's worth of work there. And then obviously to do that for 30 students, you're looking at 15 hours worth of work there. But actually doing that with AI could literally take 30 seconds. And therefore creating very, very differentiated pieces of work starts to become a lot easier, starts to become something that we can do very, very, very quickly. But we need to check over it. And I think one of the parts of that is knowing that if you're going to get AI to do something for you, most of the time anyway, you need to be an expert in that field anyway, because you're going to have to evaluate it. You're going to have to judge whether this is good or not, if this is of quality enough to share with a student. So you need to know your stuff. Now, when I say most of the time, I mean, let's say you were saying, Sam, you've got a lot of students who have English as an additional language, right, and therefore you might want to give them a resource in a different language. Now, you might want to trust the AI to a certain level, because you might not have the ability to double check the accuracy of 5 different languages. So I think in some circumstances it's safe to trust the AI, especially if you've got evidence enough to know that it does that job very well most of the time, because the greater good is that the student is going to get something that's 99% usable, right, rather than 0% usable or 20% usable because they only know a little bit of English. So I think we have to make our own personal judgments there. But I think a lot of people say to me, can it do this? Can it do that? And my answer all the time is, ask it. Just simply ask it.
Check it out.
Yeah, just it's not a tool where you read the list of functions. I don't know, let's say I use Gmail quite a bit. So if I was to go onto the Gmail, I don't know, FAQs and get a list of everything I can do within Gmail, I can write an email, I can save it to draft, I can create a label, it has a set list of things it can do, and therefore you know what it can't do. Again, this technology is not like that. It's like talking to another human being, where when you're first introduced to a new colleague, they don't present you with a list of everything they can do and everything they can't do, because that's just
interesting.
Yeah, but it's just not how we work. And also our capability doesn't just depend on us, it depends on collaboration, it depends on conversation and deeper understanding, and so on. So, and this works the same way. So I think always ask it. And if it comes back with something that's substandard, which more than often, if you're just asking it a simple question, it does, don't walk away, just think, okay, well, what can I do next? And sometimes just something as simple as saying to it, this is bad, do better, can help. Or saying to it, giving it some specific details and say, no, actually, I think you misunderstand. This is what I want you to do. This is the expertise I want you to take on board while you're doing it. And then getting it to self-reflect. I have a whole 8-lever model, which I do workshops on, where it's kind of different techniques you can use as you're having a conversation to just squeeze a bit more quality out of it, and a bit more quality. And I can share that with you for your listeners afterwards if you want. But yeah, I think just having that conversation with it and seeing what it can do, and trying it out, because I think some things we might traditionally do for differentiation, let's say like scaffolding for a task, we might not have previously entertained some of the more personalized side of differentiation, because we just kind of put it to the back of our mind because it's just been impossible to do for every student. So see how you can push the boundaries with it as well, and no one's going to sit down with you and say, this is how you use ChatGPT, this is how you don't use ChatGPT. You've got to discover that for yourself through talking to it, through asking it, and through using your own imagination.
Yeah, because every teacher is different. And that's something, kind of circling back to summarize all of this awesome information you've just given us. The idea isn't that AI is ever going to replace teachers. And really most jobs, it's not designed to replace humans, but to be an asset. I was talking to Paul Matthews. You may know him as well. He does a lot of work. He has a software that he has started called My Teacher Aid. And when I was talking to him, he just was very clear, like AI, to think that it's magic or that it's like your your teacher, like it's going to do things for you, I think is the wrong perspective, because we are, like you said, we're in the driver's seat of our classroom. We're the experts. But then having this technology help us do the things that we just don't have the time to do, like make a learning plan for 30 different kids. That would take a long time. But uploading, like, here's a snapshot of the students in my class. Here are the goals that I want them to get to. Here's where they have a struggle. Help me get them from point A to point B and make it fun for them. And that's really where it comes in as like a shining, oh my gosh, this is so cool.
Yeah, and we're still in the early days of that as well. So the process I'm talking about is very much a manual process of you talking to the AI and then getting it to do things. But we're not far away, and I know a few products that are starting to look at this of the actual school information system being able to do a lot of this automatically anyway, because it already has access to the student data. It has access to, because obviously differentiation, we're not just talking about special ed, we're not talking about students who speak a different language, we're talking about students who maybe might have a higher average grade than the next student, and therefore need a bit more, I don't know, something different than another student. And so if our information systems have this data, have reports from psychologists, for example, have key learnings from that student that can help them in classrooms, then they might be able to skip some of the steps for us and actually help us to create resources and automatically. So I think you're right. I don't think it's going to replace teachers, because I think a huge part of a teacher is the human element, and I don't think, and you're a biology teacher, you know this, we humans have literally evolved to need to be around other humans, through survival, and I don't think that's going away, and I think so we're still going to need to be around other humans, but it's what interests me is the things about our job that almost suck the humanity out of it. So they're having to input data, they're having to sit at a computer, the kind of parts of our job that treat us like a cog in a system, in a machine. I
Right.
My hope is that the AI will be developed and that we will use the AI in a way that will automate some of those tasks. So the kind of, I suppose, the job specification of a teacher might change slightly.
Sure.
But I hope that it's, and I say hope because I think we have to guide this, we have to do this with intent rather than just let it happen to us. That it actually helps us focus more on the individual, helps us spend more time with the individual because, as you know, like differentiation isn't just a resource or a scaffold or a plan. It
Yeah.
might be a conversation. It might be the fact that in that particular lesson for that particular task, we spend a bit more time with these three students and really sit down and help them understand it. Because they for
Yeah.
this type of task they need that. And so that kind of differentiation can work on so many different levels. And if we are having some of the heavy lifting taken from us or done for us through AI, then maybe it'll help us to be more human and differentiate on that level as well.
I really love that perspective. It makes me think of, and this is the way that I've thought of AI before, is that using AI, particularly when it comes to data sets, changes just facts and figures on an Excel spreadsheet into something alive almost that you could talk to and have a conversation with the data. And so I have talked to a few companies as well that have that in mind of linking the student information systems with their platform and just how much better service those tools can be to students. And you know, a whole other conversation could be about data security and all of these things. And that I feel like we're just understood that we need to be secure with the
Yeah, of
data for
course.
this
And
conversation.
I think
But
I think in the early days, a lot of people are fretting about that type of thing, and I
yeah,
think most people are concerned about that. But and when we talk about the development of these tools, part and parcel of that is that it's done in a secure way. I don't think there's anybody
yeah,
advocating for let's stick AI in an information system in a school and let
let it do whatever
yeah,
it
let
wants.
Silicon Valley have all that data.
Yeah,
When we're advocating for how this is going to look in the next few months, few years, it's yeah, like you say, it's the
yeah.
unspoken bit is that yeah, of course we want this to be in a secure way.
Yeah, and so there are lots of technologies. Our district is one of the first adopters and users of school AI. I don't know if that's they've gotten a lot of
Yeah,
recognition recently. So they're here in Utah as a startup, and just
amazing.
kind of as a serendipitous meeting, our school superintendent and the founders were in the same place at the same time,
That's amazing.
and
Yeah,
so we really got lucky in the opportunity to work with them in building this program and talking about data and talking about the features that we want it to have. And so it's an exciting time.
yeah, and even that, even a tool like School AI, where you provide a student with a specifically trained chatbot, you're
Yeah.
because the student is leading the conversation, then the chatbot is going to react to them differently. So we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about differentiation there on a whole new level, where each student every time they use it in their
Yeah.
own way is getting the information and getting the learning material in a bespoke way based
Yeah.
on their
Which is
conversation.
which then as a teacher is incredible, because if I were to have those individual conversations with students myself, I could get the same information from them, but then I have to then go evaluate all of those things, catalog that information somehow, assign a grade. But school AI does all of that also. It
Yeah,
will compile everything, give you a summary. So a lot of these automated things that we're talking about, it's exciting to see them start to come as more of a mainstream thing that's just a commonplace to help
yeah.
teachers
And I often
get
say,
better at
because
their
I
job.
sometimes do show teachers School AI, and I say, this is not to replace you. This is a second best for when you're not there. So
Right.
if the student is doing the work outside of the classroom and you're not there, if they're doing the work inside the classroom but you're working with another student at that moment,
Right.
it's
Right.
it's the second best. It's not there to replace you, and you can always jump in and be part of that conversation as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they're really powerful, and I think we're scratching the surface, because with how early we are within this technology of how personalized that can go. I think, especially then, I mean, like what we've just been saying, you plug an information system into something like that, and then it goes to a
That changes
completely new level.
Yeah. So let's kind of talk about the future. You have a book coming out really soon. So I think the release date is January 6th. So depending on when this actually drops, the book
Yeah.
could be out on shelves now. You talk about AI as a new species, which kind of is an interesting thought. We've talked about it a little bit. I'm interested to know more about this idea of how do you explore this further in the book? How is AI
Yeah.
a new species?
I mean, I can't take credit for that. So I came across that from a British entrepreneur called Mustafa Sullivan, and he was the co-founder of Deep Mind, who were a company who then were acquired by Google, and he referred to it as a new species. And I've kind of take in the book. There's a chapter where I take that idea and kind of run with it and explore it and kind of think, well, if it is that, what could it mean? So, but I think it's almost a tongue-in-cheek remark. It's not saying that this is literally a new species, but it's saying that actually maybe in part of our thinking when it comes to artificial intelligence, we should maybe think of it like that in a sense, and secondly, the kind of the flip side to that is that it will advance probably so much in the next 5, 10, 15 years that it might become indistinguishable from another species. And in fact, it could become a more intellectual species than humans. So that's kind of the idea of it. So to kind of portray how far that could go in terms of progress, but also just to start thinking of it as and I suppose it goes back to what I was just saying about when you're talking with it. If you treat it as a co-partner, as a colleague, as an assistant, and actually talk to it. I mean, I know a lot of people have issues with anthropomorphizing the AI and treating it as a human. And I'm not saying we treat it as a human, but if we have in our mind that we're speaking to something that can speak back to us, that we can talk to and develop understanding with, which we can, then how we use this and how this can be used going into the future is going to be very different, and therefore how do we prepare for that? So the whole idea of the book is in that chapter's in the first half of the book, where I'm kind of building a picture of kind of two pictures really. The first is where's this technology going, and what's happening with it, and what's likely to happen with it, and secondly, what is the education system like? And I try to almost create a bit of a dichotomy and say, well, is this education system prepared for what's coming? So as part of that chapter is kind of exploring, and is a bit of a thought experiment, but based on evidence, based on where this could likely go, and trying to get people to think of, well, are we ready for that within our education system? Are we preparing students?
What really can we do with this?
Yeah.
That's very cool. And so the title of your book is Infinite Education. And so I like the sound of that as well, because there's so much more to what we can do with technology. So where does that thought go throughout the book?
Yeah.
How do we get there?
Again, I can't take full credit for that. So this comes from an American academic in the 1980s, James Carse. He wrote a book called Finite and Infinite Games, and he comes from a business point of view. So what I've done is I've kind of taken some of his ideas and tried to apply them to education. But his whole kind of argument is that a lot of organizations play a finite game, that there's an end in sight, there's a definite, and so therefore all of their systems, all of their processes, their outlook, their philosophy is all dedicated to this end point. And actually he makes the case that actually the more successful organizations don't do that. They're playing an infinite game. They're playing to keep going. They're playing a game where they're gonna they there might be endpoints, but there's something beyond them, and therefore in their systems, their processes, and everything they're doing, it's not just all dedicated to a certain point in time. It's to playing the game forever, and this really resonated with me in terms of education because, I mean, I don't think I could think of a better example of an organization or a system that is trained on the finite game. It's all about getting students to that last day and getting them
get the grade,
that grade. And I think I kind of think, well, imagine we played the infinite game. Imagine it wasn't just about preparing students for that, but actually we said, you know what, we don't really care about that day because a snapshot of a student. Now it's quite radical because I suppose a lot of our education system in our schools are bound by this type of model, and there's no change in them anytime soon. And that's kind of the purpose of the book, to try and get people to think of how they could change that.
I see.
But imagine we designed education not just for the end point, but for the infinite game, for our students when they're 40 years old, for our students when they're 30 years old, for our society and what our society looks like now and what it's going to look like, then I think it starts to become really apparent that, of course, the end point, whatever that looks like, the last day of the semester or the exam or the whatever it is, the graduation ceremony, almost doesn't matter. It's a very insignificant part of the journey. Because we're preparing our students for success for life, and that goes so far beyond. And so I start to bring in different ideas of schools, educators and innovators who've treated education like this, and some of the radical things they've done to their educational organizations in order to follow that. Like, and just to give you a quick example, a guy called Yaakov Hecht, who's in Israel, and he founded an organization called Democratic Schools, and more recently City Schools, and their whole idea is that the city they're in, I think they're in Tel Aviv, but it could be applied anywhere. The city that you're in, why can't that be the school? Why are we trying to make a microcosm of society within a secure building somewhere, and then train our students within that kind of fake environment, in inverted commas, because that's quite a loaded word, fake. I don't mean it necessarily in a negative way, but in a way that's not kind of the world out there. When actually, and I think he gives the example of a student comes to him and says, "I want to learn dance. I want to be a dancer." In his view, he doesn't then go, right, I need a dance teacher. I'm not going to bring somebody into the school to teach dance in the school when there's 20, 30, 40 dance teachers in the city who have dance classes. It probably makes more sense to send the student into the city to learn dance, because then that person is learning from someone who is probably really good and actually is doing it with other dancers. Somebody who hasn't trained to be a teacher and left the profession of dancing. Somebody who and they'll get an experience of other people in that setting and all sorts. And you can probably take that idea and apply it to millions of the different types of scenarios. But I think, and that's just one example, and I think once we start to shift our mindset to the infinite education mindset, then we start to see education as something a lot bigger than kind of just what we've traditionally done. And then we can even, now this does get quite radical, but we can even question what a teacher is then. Now I'm not saying you replace our teachers, but imagine members of the community came in and shared their expertise and their experience, and other students taught other students. And there's a school in Manchester in England where they do that on a Saturday. their older students put classes on for their younger students.
Wow.
And yeah, it's pretty cool. And I think it's kind of, once you make that mind shift change,
Right.
and I think I use this quote in the book, that don't play within the boundaries, play with the boundaries. And I think once you kind of get that mindset of, actually, if we're playing the infinite game here, how might we play with the boundaries in order to prepare our students for that world? And even not even just prepare them for it, actually put them in it right now, because who says that our students right now can't offer value to the world and can't solve problems right now? So I think it's a book that kind of, I want to make people think about, well, how can we really, from the roots, and I keep saying the word radical, and I mean it in that literal way. With the word literally means from the root. So how do we go back to the roots of education? Really check ourselves, put ourselves in check, and think, why are we doing this? What's the purpose of this? And then go, well, how do we then build from the bottom up again? Now, that's really difficult to do, especially when you've got an established school, to go, right, let's build from the bottom up again. It's impossible. So the second half of the book is kind of practical steps, strategic steps of how you start to do that within a pre-existing rigid system, and how you start to play with ideas and let them influence the rest of the organization and bring about change. So yeah, that's the book, and it's kind of based on the last, I suppose, my strategic experience from the last however many years, but then more acutely, especially over the last 2 years, where I've been working with schools and districts on their strategy and on their outlook. So it's based on that. I've kind of filtered down what's worked, what hasn't worked, and try and put the stuff that works into that second half of the book, the practical side.
Very cool. So it sounds like like the two acts of your book is like, hey, here's this fantastic world that doesn't exist right now exactly, but here's what it could be. Kind of getting us all excited about, oh my gosh, look at all these cool things. And then the second act, we dial it back and say, okay, so how do we do this now?
Yeah.
I love things like that.
Yeah, I guess. Where, and it's not, and I don't portray it all as good, because it's not. And part of building that new thing that is going to be about mitigating against the risks as well. Of course it is. So it's not about going, this is going to be amazing, let's run for it. It's more going, actually, this is probably what's going to happen. If we really, and I delve deep in the research of what people who are behind the scenes, what they're saying about this technology, and start to infer some things about where this technology is actually going by the people who have likely got the AI that we're not going to see for another few years.
Right.
Because I mean, even ChatGPT 4. Mustafa Suleyman, who I mentioned before, was working at Google in 2016, and he said Google had the capability of ChatGPT 4 back in 2016. So the chances are these guys are working on. In fact, I know a friend who was working with someone from OpenAI, the company who created ChatGPT, recently, and he showed him his ChatGPT app on his phone. And if you got the ChatGPT app, you've got access to a few different models. You've got in there. Well, this guy who worked for them had a long list of models in his phone. Wow. Experimental models with crazy capability. So we know that these guys have got things that are far more advanced behind the scenes, and not only that, they're still saying that we're in for a lot of progress. So it's more about going, you know what, this is likely going to happen. And this is, and even just the stuff that's being worked on is crazy. If you look at the robotics side of things with like the Tesla robots, the Figure robots, you look at the brain technology, the Neuralink, the medical science side of things, the nano robots that are fighting cancer in the bloodstream, powered by artificial intelligence. Things are going to get interesting over the next few years, and we're likely going to be living in a very different society that has a different outlook within the next few decades. So that first part is about going, well, this is She's not necessarily amazing. Some of it is, and I love it, and that's why I do this, because I think there's going to be so many benefits from it. But it's about going, actually, this is probably a reality that we're now walking into. So how do we
get there?
how do we
Prepare for when it comes.
Yeah, and how do
Yeah.
we? And my whole point is actually, as leaders, we should start building for that now. If we want to remain leaders into that future, if we want to just follow, then don't. I suppose just wait till everybody else is doing it. But if you want to be a leader in education in the next few years, then the time to start acting is now. And if you want your schools and organisations to be competitive and stay relevant and to prepare students for that world, then we need to start now, I think.
Well, that's awesome. So the Infinite Education comes out very, very soon. I'm assuming bookstores, online.
Yeah,
where's
I
the best
think
place to find
Amazon. I think it will then go through to kind of mainstream bookstores, Barnes and Noble, and the likes. By the time this goes out, it should be on pre-order if it's not already released. So if you're listening to this before January the 6th, it'll be on pre-order on Amazon. And if you pre-order it, actually, and then go to infiniteeducation.ai, you get access to a bonus chapter and an exclusive webinar as well. So check out the pre-order, or if it's past January the 6th, you can still get access to that if you purchase it. So thank you.
Fantastic. Awesome. One other question that I'm always interested in with educators is I feel like teachers come from one of two camps, where in grade school you were a good student and that's why you played the game and you loved school and that's why you became a teacher, or you were the opposite, where you didn't play the game very well, school wasn't necessarily your thing, and that's why you're a teacher. So I'm interested for you, how was your younger years? Young Dan, little Danny in high school. Were you a good student? Was it easy for you?
Not really. I think I think when I was at school, I got in with a good crowd of people. The type of school I went to was a Catholic school, but in England, religious schools aren't independent; they're state funded. So I went to a local Catholic school, and there was a full range of students. So there were students who were doing exceptionally well, going to go to the top universities, and then I suppose the opposite of that. And I remember what we call primary school, which is like elementary school for you guys. When I went into high school from elementary school, I kind of went in right in the middle in terms of my grades. And so I could have went either way, I guess. And I think I often think about this, and I think I was really lucky that I got in with a group of people who took their studies seriously, who were just all round good people. And I pushed myself. I don't think I was always naturally capable in various different subjects, but I always pushed myself because I suppose I just thought, well, I'm one of those people, so I should be at that level. And I think, I often think about that, because I often think, actually, and I think there's some research around this about who kind of your peer group are, and therefore what you expect from yourself and so on. So I was the type of student where I was quite shy. I wasn't kind of rowdy in school or anything, but I always just kind of did enough to get by. And I kind of always knew in the back of my mind that I probably had some more there to give, but I wasn't really concerned about that because I'd done enough to get by. So I did okay at school. I got to university. When I was at university, I did much better than I would have, than you probably would have thought if you'd come across me at school. And I actually studied. So my background, I studied theology. That was my main.
Interesting.
Wow. Yeah. So talk about career changes. So which then, with that type of degree, there wasn't really much else to do apart from going to be a teacher, to be honest. So it's not something like I I was like growing up, you know how you get some people who are like always wanted to be a teacher. They
Right.
fall in love with that romantic idea of being a teacher. And I normally find it's English teachers who are like that. No offense to English teachers, but
Yeah.
I've got some good friends who are English teachers, but you know, like the Robin Williams and what's that movie called?
Right.
What's it called?
That's a great question. I know exactly what
Where
movie.
he's like
Oh,
standing on
Captain,
the,
my Captain. But
yeah, and he's like standing on the desk and he's teaching them poetry. It's kind
all of my English teacher friends are gonna like come at me. Like, really, you didn't know the name of that film?
sometimes I think English teachers like fall in love with that romantic idea of teaching
Yeah.
literature. But so I never really had that. I just kind of I loved working with students who didn't think they would amount to much. Like I loved I loved that. I loved working with the students who weren't naturally getting good grades and also had really one of the schools I taught in was in a very deprived area. There's a lot of villages in the northeast of England that were kind of their main income and jobs were coal mines and kind of in the 80s. When Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister, she shut down all the coal mines, and so there's still a lot of villagers out there that are still suffering. Really, they haven't never really recovered, so they're very deprived economically and so on. And it was where the school was kind of amongst some of those villages. So we had a lot of students who didn't have much and actually had less when they went home as well. Very, very poor circumstances. So I loved working with those types of kids and helping them. And I taught philosophy, so I loved kind of challenging their view. A bit like what I suppose what I'm trying to do, I guess, and trying to get people to think, actually, just because somebody tells you something is reality, you don't have to accept it. We can actually change it. So I loved kind of getting into that. So yeah, that's
cool.
That was kind of my journey.
Yeah, that's similar to me, I guess. I wasn't particularly great at school. In fact, I didn't anticipate going to college after high school.
Right.
Like, school was really a challenge for me, and it wasn't actually until my senior year, so last year of high school, that my mom was like, "Wow, maybe we just got to like go get you tested for this, that, and the other thing." And so found out as a senior that, oh yeah, you have severe ADHD.
Right.
You have reading disabilities. So it was like dyslexia, dysgraphia kind of things going on. And I was like, oh, well, that would have been nice to know a long time ago. But it kind of became, and you might hear this from other people talking about how ADHD is their superpower.
Yeah.
And I really learned, because I had to, how to embrace how my mind works and how learning looks for me. And so it's kind of along that journey of learning how to learn that I decided, like, wow, I'm sure there are other people like me in high school that just are having a hard time and don't know why. And I would love for them to like tap into their potential, because there's so many people that have amazing ideas, like future world leaders, innovators, that are kids right now that need a way to get their ideas into real life. And so I've loved this conversation for that purpose of like the idea of infinite education. Is ironically, I was talking just last night to a group of youth about high school and how high school can prepare you for college and for other things. And one of my main talking points was, don't worry about what your career's going to be or not going to be. Don't focus on whatever the end point you think you have. Focus on the process of learning and understanding how you acquire knowledge and fall in love with that process. And then just get as much education as possible for that thing that drives you, and let that be what takes you through life. And you'll find your place. Like I found my place. I love education. If you were to talk to my high school self and say, hey, guess what, Sam? You're going to like graduate from university. You're going to actually be a teacher. You're going to have a master's degree. You're going to do all these different things. I would be like, I don't know if that's true. But really unlocking and opening our eyes to the education is not a finite ending experience. It doesn't end with whatever grade you get at the end of the term. It doesn't end with that academic year, but it's ongoing and really helping our students understand that. And it sounds like from your book, helping schools build in this systems and processes to help students get there as well.
And I see. I was saying before, like teachers get in this job to help students, and I think sometimes the bureaucracy really grinds on us, and hopefully AI will. That's the places it will help us and start to help us. And I've just remembered the name of the movie, with Dead Poets Society.
Oh, Dead Poets. Yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. Redemption has been made
in the end. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Dan, thank you very much. Where's the best place for people to get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
So my main website is the AIeducator.io. And if you go there, you'll find links to the book and into all of my other work. There's links to get in contact. So if you want to get in contact, please feel free.
Fantastic. Dan, thanks so much. This has been the Think Like a Teacher podcast, and we'll see y'all next time.